Okay, everyone, welcome to part one of this discussion on JWO-rigged wars through the ages. The past several thousand years of human history can only be made sense of when one considers the hidden and yet sometimes not so hidden hand of our little Jewish supremacist friends pulling the strings from behind the scenes, right? And so when we look at the history of warfare, we find, not surprising, that their hand was involved there as well, and most heavily so. In fact, there really wasn't any war, there hasn't been any war in history that they have not orchestrated, financed, and benefited from for the past 2,500 frickin' years, right? 3,500 years plus. So let's have a look. Um, a brief look anyway. I mean, this is going to take several videos to cover, but it's still brief because you could, you know, look at each war individually, and it would require several videos to cover in detail. But anyway, we're going to look at a brief overview at some of the more major examples of this. But even the minor wars through history, their fingerprints have been all over. But let's start with the Greco-Persian Wars of 500 to 449 BC. I've touched on this already in some recent videos, but let's look at it in some more detail here. From the beginning of the Persian Empire, under the reign of King Cyrus the Great, who reigned from 559 to 530 BC, Jewish supremacists were cozying up to the Persians, particularly to Cyrus himself, who had vowed to the Jews, that he would rebuild destroyed Jerusalem, particularly its temple, which had been sacked by the Babylonians, right? Previously, they were cozying up with the Babylonians, but, as they started to wise up to them, they realized, okay, we've taken this as far as we can go with it. They're not cooperating anymore, so we got to sick the Persians on them now. And then, of course, we know how that turned out later, right? Eventually, things didn't work out with the Persians anymore. They started figuring out what was going on. And then they turned to the Greeks, and on it goes. But anyway, in the Old Testament book of Ezra, chapter 1, verse 1, we read this. Now, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, and don't forget, later on in the book of Isaiah, Cyrus is called the Lord's anointed, or the Lord's Christ, right? Cyrus was the first Christ figure in the Bible. It says, the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, in order that it might be fulfilled. In other words, Yahweh supposedly had prophesied that this was going to happen. Oh, knock it off. How did they prophesy it was going to happen? Because they knew they were going to be able to buy the king off. Probably already had begun negotiations. So then the priests would write up this phony BS about Yahweh predicting it, so that when it happened, because they made it happen with their shekels, the low-level Jews would get all excited over it and would become even more enthralled with the religion, and thus it became an even greater tool to manipulate them, right? Anyway, it says, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout his kingdom to restore the temple and to restore Jerusalem, right? The Lord did it. He stirred up Cyrus. Really? Is that what it was? Was it the Lord that stirred up Cyrus? No, it was some big fat wads of shekels waved before his face. Was it the Lord who stirred up, the British through the Balfour Declaration? No, that wasn't the Lord, was it? It's a little scheming behind the scenes, as always. Anyway, Cyrus's royal decree went forth in the year 536 BC, at which time nearly 50,000 Jews returned to Jerusalem. There they go again, right? Using a foreign nation's tax dollars through a bribed king to do their bidding, to set up their little holy land for them again, and to actually assist, not just assist, to pay for the whole frickin' thing, right? For them to move back to their holy land, so-called. Unbelievable, guys. How many other times has this gone on through history? Oh, way too many. Way too many. So happy was the Lord with Cyrus, bending over backwards for his little Chosenites, that we read this, which is the passage I made reference to a moment ago, in Isaiah 45, verse 1, and also 44, verse 28. We're going to read both of those verses successively here. This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus. Again, anointed, which is what Christ means, right? The anointed one. This is what Yahweh says to his Christ, to his King Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold of, to subdue nations before him, and to strip kings of their armor, to open doors before him, so that gates will not be shut. What this is really referring to here is the behind-the-scenes elite JWO manipulation of this king to do their bidding, and calling it the divine hand of God working miracles. Bible dupes to this day read this disgusting propagandic slop and still fall for it, just as the low-level Jews fell for it centuries and centuries ago. They still interpret this to mean God was divinely intervening on behalf of his chosen favorites. Really? Really? It was fat, stolen wads of cash that they just got done stealing from the Babylonians, that they're using now to bribe the Persians with, to take out the Babylonians for them. Well, they had already done that at this point. And now to reestablish them in their so-called Holy Land that they were taken from by the Babylonians. And ultimately, without the Persians realizing it, they were using them to help what they hoped would be, the setting up of their headquarters for their world government enterprise that would rule over them eventually. Didn't quite play out that way, but they did assist them nonetheless with Persian tax dollars. Assist them. They facilitated the whole thing with Persian tax dollars to move them back to their so-called Holy Land, and ultimately, as they had hoped anyway, to set them up as the rulers of the world. We're going to buttress you now. We're going to help you guys now so we can sucker you to do our bidding and get you to think that we're actually out for your interest. But later, if we can have our way, we're going to stiff you, and you're going to be under our rulership. Anyway, the passage went on to say, he is my shepherd and will accomplish all that I please. This is Yahweh speaking again about Cyrus. He will say of Jerusalem, let it be rebuilt, and of the temple, let its foundations be laid. So again, the idea here that this is all at the behest of Mr. Yahweh, divinely moving on the king's heart. What moved on the king's heart? Big, fat wads of stolen shekels. That's what moved on his heart. He is my shepherd. Funny, because King Cyrus was a friggin' pagan, right? Yahweh supposedly hated pagans, denounced them all the time. But now that this pagan is doing something for his Chosenites, because they bought him off, right? Suddenly now, oh, he's a great man. You gotta love that Yahwehtian hypocrisy, right? Yahweh hates pagans and wants them all killed, but oh, when they can be used to advance the cause of his Chosenites, then he's not only a good person, why, he's my anointed one. The little kissy-kissy game until they can get what they want. How vomit-inducing. Cyrus began his decree with these words, according to Ezra 1, verse 2, and it probably wasn't much different in the actual historical reality that played out. The Lord God of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth, Cyrus supposedly said, right? And he hath charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, i.e. the temple, which is in Judah. What King Cyrus probably said wasn't much different from this. I don't think he acknowledged the JWO God, but, that was the priests coming in and saying that, right? But nevertheless, a lot of puckering up was going on. Whoa, aren't these people nice? Look how they're helping me out. Of course I'll help you out. I'll rebuild your temple. Thank you for funding me and help me to take over Babylon now, so I can emerge as the big man on campus. Or so he thought. Anyway, so the JWOs of the day won over this king to be their new minion now. They were done sucking off the Babylonian host, and now the parasite moves on to the Persians. But all didn't go quite so well for them in the long run, though. They ran into some trouble from, quote, enemies, according to the book of Ezra, who didn't want the temple rebuilt. These were Babylonians, or those from the Trans-Euphrates, as the Bible refers to them, who are now under the rulership of Persia, who were rightly disgusted that their tax dollars were being used for this very costly foreign project, and that this whole agenda was being, thrust on their lap. They were being made to pay for it and work for it too. I'm sure they sent Babylonians up there as slaves to work in this project. And so the work on the reconstruction had ceased for several decades because of all of the refusals to cooperate, right? The work started, but the protests rang so loud and people were walking out, not even caring if it would cost them their lives, that the project was abandoned, for a time anyway. As the story goes, it was later, under the reign of King Darius of Persia, that the rebuilding work had resumed. Again, the power of the shekel kicked in, right? And now they're buying off Darius to finish off what Cyrus, had started, wasn't able to finish. So a petition was sent to this king asking him to see to it that work would resume. In response to this decree, Darius said, as recorded in Ezra 6, verses 7 to 10, "Do not interfere with the work on this temple of God." Again, do you think he actually said this? He said something akin to it, but he wasn't acknowledging the Hebrew God. Again, this is the priests kicking in here with their BS propaganda. "Do not interfere with the work on this temple of God. Let the governor of the Jews and the Jewish elders rebuild this house of God on its site." They didn't do any rebuilding themselves. They were just there on the scene, telling them how they wanted it to turn out, giving directions or whatever. But no, they never do any of the work themselves, ever. They have the Goyim do their work for them. Moreover, it says, "I hereby decree," or Darius is supposed to be talking here. "I hereby decree that you are to do for these elders of the Jews in the construction of this house of God. Their expenses are to be fully paid out of the royal treasury." How do you like that? Oh, you can bet this is true. You can bet this is historically accurate. Here was Darius decreeing that his own Persian treasury was going to be used for this building project. Unbelievable. "From the revenues of Trans-Euphrates, specifically, well, I'm sure some Persian taxes, but more heavily so, Babylonian taxes, the Trans-Euphrates, Babylon. So you see what was going on here? They were most heavily taxing the Babylonians to pay for this. This was the ultimate revenge now for the Zio pig scumbags, right? They're going to use Babylonian labor and Babylonian tax dollars. You didn't let us continue with our raping and pillaging of your country. You rose up against us. Now look what it cost you. We got your country invaded. You're no longer in control. Now you're vassals to your sovereign lords in Persia that we have paid off and helped to assist in taking you over. Now the ultimate humiliation, we're going to have you enslaved through, forced labor and through taxation, and make you pay for the rebuilding of our holy land that you invaded in the first place. Check it out, guys. And here it is, right in the pages of the Not So Holy book. So that the work will not stop, it says. Whatever is needed, young bulls, rams, male lambs for burnt offerings to the God of heaven, and wheat, salt, wine, and olive oil, as requested by the priests in Jerusalem, must be given them daily without fail. This is Darius's decree. I have no doubt that this is exactly what went on. A lot of puckering up here out of gratitude. Wow, you guys really helped me. I have emerged now as the big man on campus. And in gratefulness and gratitude for you guys, yes, I hate the Babylonians. So I'm going to punish them and make them pay for all of this. Yeah, I have no doubt this is historically accurate right here. Not too much in the Bible is, but this, oh, you can bet this is exactly how this played out. This must be done, said Darius, so that the daily sacrifices pleasing to the God of heaven may resume, and pray for the well-being of the king and his sons. Unbelievable, man. Wow. Once again, insult to injury, right? Not only were the Babylonians overthrown at the hand of the Zios, but now turned into physical and financial slaves to rebuild the city of the people that sabotaged their government in the first place, that wrecked their economy, and then sicked the Persians on them. It's mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. And that would be bad enough if we just had this ugly history to look back at and see what they've gotten away with in country after country, committing so much evil, so many atrocities, wrecking so many lives, right? And bringing to an end so many lives under horrific circumstances. But it's still going on today on a much grander scale than ever before. That's the ultimate mind blower. Anyway, the work continued, we're told, under the reign of the next Persian king as well, Xerxes, or Artaxerxes as the Bible calls him. His decree read as follows, according to Ezra 7, verses 12 to 26. It says, Artaxerxes, king of kings. Funny how the Bible would even allow a pagan king, or any king for that matter, to be given a title that the Bible claims belongs to Yahweh and his Yahweh Jr. alone, King of Kings. The Bible has no qualms here, though, with using this title. Here it is using it. Why? Why would the Bible give that title to someone that is supposed to only belong to Yahweh and Jesus? Because this king was puckering up. So of course they're going to call him King of Kings. Of course they're going to exalt him and give him all these high titles that they later claimed only belonged to their God, because he was doing their bidding. Anyway, it says, to Ezra the priest, and by the way, it's believed that Ezra was the scribe responsible more than any other. Others contributed, yes, but he was the main overseer of the whole project, excuse me, of the whole project of assembling what we now have as the or most of it anyway, the Old Testament. A few books came along later, but most of the Old Testament books were assembled and probably written from scratch. Yeah, some were assembled from old manuscripts, they hodgepodged it. And you can see what a sloppy job it was, too, by the way. If you ever looked into what is called the documentary hypothesis, you'll see how the Old Testament is just a really sloppily assembled collection of multiple stories and manuscripts that, overlap and conflict with each other. And anyways. So this is the character that was primarily the overseer of all of this, Ezra the priest. To Ezra the priest, it says, teacher of the law of God, greetings. This is the decree of Artaxerxes now. Now I decree that any of the Israelites in my kingdom, including priests and Levites, who volunteer to go to Jerusalem with you, may go. So he's giving his permission. Any priests who want to go may go and oversee the project there that I'm going to carry on, that was started by Cyrus, continued with Darius. I now, Artaxerxes, are going to finish the job and completely restore Jerusalem to its former glory before Nebuchadnezzar had decimated it. And all with mostly Babylonian labor and tax dollars. You are sent by the king, you, the priesthood, and his 7 advisors, probably all of which were Hebrews, I'm sure, to inquire about Judah and Jerusalem with regard to the law of your God, which is in your hand. Moreover, you are to take with you the silver and the gold that the king and his advisors have freely given to the God of Israel. Did you freaking catch that? Holy crap, is that a jaw dropper? He's telling them, you can take all the silver and gold with you that I have given to the God of Israel. Do you really think the king said that? Again, the priests added this in. Why was the king doing it? Because this was the deal that was struck up, you see. The same deal they've always struck up everywhere they've gone when they've got a sellout frickin' ruler licking their hind parts. We'll give you all the loans you want, but you're going to pay us back in gold and silver. We'll give you bronze coinage. And, you can accomplish all of your stated goals that you want with these loans. They are going to come attached with high interest, but what do you care? It's not your pocket, O king, that's getting picked. In fact, isn't this a brilliant idea? You can achieve whatever you want with our help. Without our help, though, you're screwed. You're not going to be able to do it. Doesn't it make sense to go along with this little scheme? Who cares if you're selling out? Don't tell me you have a conscience. That's so passé. Rulers, good rulers, have no conscience at all. Good rulers could never accomplish what they want if they have a conscience. That's right out of the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, by the way. Paraphrasing it, but that's the exact message, amongst many other disgusting messages in that document. But it's there. Anyway. So he's saying here that he's, going to assist them, provide them protection, to bring them back to their holy land. And he's going to send with them silver and gold. Silver and gold. Silver and gold. That's all they've ever been after, right? And where did this silver and gold wind up? in their restored temple, their ancient banking house, whose dwelling, he said, is in Jerusalem, together with all the silver and gold that you may obtain from the province of Babylon. In other words, all the gold you steal or coerce out of the Babylonians or collect in the form of taxation, right? You can bring all of that gold and silver too to Jerusalem. Bending over backwards. He didn't care because even though the worthless coinage had no value, right? It was still enabling him to do what he wanted. So, hey, whatever, keep those worthless coins flowing as long as I can still do what I want. And you can have the silver and gold. Assisting them, whether he realized it or not, in their goal, which did not come to fruition as they planned, but their goal was to emerge as, the victor now, and ultimately the rulers of the world, having amassed all the gold and silver, under their control, and having infiltrated, Persia, taking control of it from within. They wouldn't have any serious competitors anymore, and they could keep everyone in line with Persia's military. That was their aim. And then ultimately relocate that military to Jerusalem and have it defend them as the world capital. Look how all of this was done in preparation for that goal, right? They had free reign. They were taking the gold and silver from Persia. They were taking it from Babylon. Unreal, man. He went on to say, as well as the free will offerings of the people and priests for the temple of their God in Jerusalem. Free will offerings. Yeah. The Bible uses that term quite a bit, right? Free will offerings. Free will? Yeah. When you're told you must render it to Yahweh, or Yahweh's going to fry your fanny throughout all of eternity. Free will. It was coerced will. But anyway, he went on to say, with this money, be sure to buy bulls, rams, and male lambs, together with their grain offerings and drink offerings, and sacrifice them on the altar of the temple of your God in Jerusalem. You really think the king said this too? I mean, it's possible they could have paid him off. Look, just for window dressing purposes. So all the Jews under your reign will hear this and it'll, okay, yeah, whatever. Okay, where do I start? Right here on this line? Okay, I'll read this tomorrow. But most likely it's just, priestly propaganda. Nevertheless, this king kissed their hindparts, bent over backwards for them. But again, you really think he's going to acknowledge their God and call him the God of heaven? This was a polytheist, right? Baloney. Again, if he did read this, it was just for window dressing purposes. He didn't mean a word of it. But it doesn't matter. He was a sellout, right? He was selling his own people out and assisting. I got to wonder, did he know ultimately where this was going to go? Did he not know that they were ultimately going to turn on him? Maybe not. Maybe he really thought that, I don't care if I sell my own people out. These guys are going to take care of me. That's all that matters. I'm sure that's what he thought. That's what most bought-off kings have thought through the ages, never knowing that they were going to turn around and shaft him if he became a problem, or if his nation became a problem. They would shaft his nation. You and your fellow Israelites, he said, may then do whatever seems best with the rest of the silver and the gold. Oh, wow. He's giving him a blank check. You can do whatever seems best to you. It's yours. Take it. In accordance, he said, with the will of your God. Yeah. So as long as they got that, thus saith the Lord in there, then yeah, they could do whatever they wanted with their gold. Thus says the Lord. You see the power of religion, especially Abrahamic religion, guys, which has always and only been nothing but a cover for financial and political rape jobs. Just put that claim in there that Yahweh says. You didn't say Yahweh says. You lost. You have to precede everything by Yahweh says, like the Simon Says game, right? And isn't it funny how it's Simon Says? That's not an Irish name now, is it? It's not Italian. It's not Greek. It's not German. It's not French. What kind of a name is Simon? Simon Says. They couldn't be so bold as to call this childhood game Yahweh Says. But they still got a Jewish name in there anyway, right? Yeah. It's only right when Simon says or when Yahweh says. You lose the game if you do anything without preceding it by Yahweh says. But when you precede it with that, you'll come up with a winning hand every time in Jew world. Anyway, and it doesn't matter how evil the proclamation is, how evil the actions are described in the proclamation, right? As long as Yahweh says, it makes them holy, just, and righteous. Bible dupes to this day fall for that, don't they? Christians will insist that Yahweh has never done or said anything wrong, even though everything Yahweh has ever done in that not-so-holy book and said has been evil. Not just wrong, outright evil. But nope, in the Yahweh Says game, everything Yahweh says, everything Yahweh does is holy, just, and righteous, while yet being the antithesis of all of those things. Deliver to the God of Jerusalem, he went on to say, all of the articles entrusted to you for worship in the temple of your God. The temple was looted by the Babylonians, right? So now he's telling them, go back and take all of that and bring it back to Jerusalem, along with all the silver and gold, fully restoring to them their footing back in the not-so-holy land. And anything else needed for the temple of your God that you are responsible to supply, you may provide from the royal treasury. Anything you need for the temple of your God, it will be provided for you from what? The royal treasury. And isn't that how it works today? Look at how anything Israel wants, it gets from our royal treasury, if you will, right? How many times do they dip their hands in, and do they dip them deep, deep, deep. So deep that there's not only nothing left when their hand comes up, but they dug below the level of the vat. In other words, they not only leave us penniless, but they ensure that the next penny we get in our hand winds up in their pocket through their little usury scheme, right? They get everything we have now and ensure that everything we get later is going to wind up in their pocket too. They've been robbing our royal treasury from the word go, but more so as time has gone on, right? More and more and more so. And in so many ways, not just through taxation. That's one of the many ways. Through many, many ways. And not just us. Every frickin' nation on the planet now is being plundered by these SOBs, guys. Just as they were doing back then. It goes on. Now I, King Artaxerxes, or Xerxes, decree that all of the treasures of Trans-Euphrates are to provide with diligence whatever Ezra the priest, the teacher of the law of the God of heaven, may ask of you. Up to 100 talents of silver, 100 cores of wheat, 100 baths of wine, 100 baths of olive oil, and salt without limit. The booty they were walking away with here. Whatever the God of heaven has prescribed. Notice the God of heaven. What does that really mean? Whatever the Jews want. Whatever the God of heaven has prescribed, let it be done with diligence for the temple of the God of heaven. Notice how many times he keeps saying the God of heaven, God of heaven. Like he's suddenly a monotheist now that believes in this loser with horns, fangs, and claws as the only God now. Yeah, whatever. Again, guys, he either never said it, the priest made it up, or he was coerced into saying it, but not believing it, but didn't care because his pockets were getting lined. He was getting what he wanted. But oh, were the Jews of his day getting what they wanted? Why should his wrath fall on the realm of the king and of his sons? This is the king now trying to justify licking the hind parts of the Chosenites, right? Why should the wrath of their God fall upon me? He may very well have said this because they reminded him, look, O king, what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. This was our God who did this for us. You don't want that to happen to you too, do you? This king probably had no idea of the history of how they were the ones that opened the door for his earlier predecessor to march in and take over Babylon, right? The Bible again and again talks about how the fear of the Lord was upon this king and that king and the other king. Yeah, through propaganda. They probably had, people were very, very extra superstitious back then. So, and their advisors were Jews for the most part, right? So yeah, they would have them filled with fear, They'd wow them with their magic tricks to convince them that their God was real. See how he enabled me to make that rabbit appear out of the hat? And then from there, convince the king, yes, you don't know these stories? Oh, let me tell you, sit down. Of how our God wiped out this king and that king. You don't want that to happen to you, O king, do you? It only makes sense that you don't arouse our God's wrath. And besides, we're going to help you in your rise to power. This passage went on to say, you are also, or Xerxes, Artaxerxes, he said, you are also to know that you have no authority to impose taxes, tribute, or duty on any of the priests, Levites, musicians, gatekeepers, temple servants, or other workers at this house of God. Tax-free, baby. Tax-free for the Jewish leaders, the very ones who impose the most heavy, burdensome taxes in every country wherever they have exerted an influence, right? They've always seen to it that taxes go through the roof so they can line their pockets with the bulk of it. But yet, they have always seen to it that they go tax-free. Later, don't forget, after Persia ticked them off and they got the Greeks to come in and take Persia over, what did Alexander the Great do? He promised that later generation of Zio pig bastard bankers tax exemption for life in Samaria. He gave them Samaria as a tax-exempt haven. What a familiar pattern. Oh, is it ever familiar? Xerxes, or Artaxerxes, went on to say, and you, Ezra, in accordance with the wisdom of your God, which you possess. Oh, yeah. You see how he had him fooled? My God gave me this great wisdom. Appoint, he said, magistrates and judges to administer justice to all the people of Trans-Euphrates, all who know the laws of your God. Oh, my frick. Did you catch that? Do you realize what this is saying? He was giving Ezra a blank check here. Absolute power to determine how justice was going to be carried out in the Trans-Euphrates, i.e., Babylon. Holy frickin' crap. He was putting the Babylonians at the mercy of this scoundrelous pig, Ezra. He was the Chabad Lubavitch rabbi of the day, right? He's giving him free rein now. You have say over how justice is going to be served in Babylon. Oh, you can bet the wrath of Khan was unleashed on Babylon under his watch. Mercilessly so. Stand up and resist our criminal activity, will you? You're gonna see what happens to those who get in our way of our trail of crime. Holy crap, guys. Oh, you can bet this part of the biblical narrative is most accurate as well. There's no reason to question this. This is right in line with how they operate, always have. And yet Bible dupes read this and frickin' cheer it on. Oh, Yahweh's so wonderful. Look how he blessed his people. They cheer on the story of Joseph, who raped and pillaged Egypt, right? See how God blessed them? The very same passage that they read from tells them that the Egyptians were desperate and in want, had nothing to eat. They were dying from the famine that they rigged, and yet they were living high off the hog, voluptuously, in great comfort. And they cheer that on. Damn fools. The passage goes on to say, and you are to teach any who do not know them, these laws of Ezra's God. You're to teach them. You're to cram them down their throats. Do you see how? Everywhere they've gone. This is another thing they've done. Enforce their religion, right? Every time the Zios got control, like under the Hasmoneans, for example, or down in Ethiopia, or the Arab version, the Amariahs, or whatever the heck it was. I forget the exact name now. But everywhere they've gotten power, guys, this is what they've done. They've enforced their filthy pig religion on the native populations where they had control, right? Bow and lick our God's feet. And in licking their God's feet, whose feet are they really licking? Theirs. Theirs. You are to teach them who do not know these laws. And whoever does not obey the law of your God, this is Noahidism, isn't it? Whoever does not obey the law of your God and the law of the king must surely be punished by death. That's what the Noahide law is all about, right? That's the ultimate aim of it all. Follow our God, or you will be put to death. You had the Noahide laws in place right here, didn't you? Yeah. Not just death, though. For others, he said, banishment, confiscation of property, or imprisonment. So some were put to death, but others, if it was a less abrasive offense, and if you had some connections, okay, well, we won't be so harsh on you, but we're still going to banish you, or confiscate everything you own, or imprison you, or maybe all of them together. As you can see, there was some major butt kissing going on here, right? Isn't it obvious? Look how this king Xerxes, or Artaxerxes, as the Bible calls him, was rolling the red carpet out for them, giving them their heart's frickin' desire. But this was short-lived as well. For Xerxes soon found out that he had been duped, that these people that he was assisting could not be trusted, and thus he backtracked. Very interesting. After being tipped off by some officials in Babylon, who knew these people all too well, had a lot more experience working with them, and a few other surrounding regions, that had tipped him off, to giving them the same story, in the Trans-Euphrates, and, told him how he was supporting troublemakers that were going to turn their back on him eventually. He wrote back to them saying, and this is from Ezra 4:17-22, to Rahum, the commanding officer, Shimshai, the secretary, and to the rest of their associates living in Samaria, and elsewhere in the Trans-Euphrates. Greetings, he says. The letter that you sent us has been read and translated in my presence. I issued an order and a search was conducted, and it was found that this city, Jerusalem, has a long history of revolt against kings and has been a place of rebellion and sedition. Woo! Do not forget that this is recorded in the Not So Holy Book. Whee! Remember I said very often their own literature, including the detestable Bible, very often, well, not very often, but on occasion, they expose their own selves. Well, here it is, guys. Here it is. This king just said, this is Xerxes, their former buddy, right, who was inflicting all of these punishment, well, giving Ezra control over how justice was to be carried out in Babylon, and to enforce Jewish laws on them, Noahide type laws, letting them take all the silver and gold, blah, blah, blah. This same guy now caught on, finally. He broke out of their little mesmeristic hypnotic trance, and now he's telling them, it has been heard that you have a long history of engaging in revolts against kings, rising up rebellions and seditions. Oh, do they ever have such a history? And this was before the Great Revolt of 66 under the Romans, right? That was a latecomer. They had been at this long before that. Jerusalem, he said, has had powerful kings ruling over the whole of Trans-Euphrates. And taxes, tribute, and duty were paid to them. This is true because, they would rule under proxy, under, kings like Babylon, also under Egyptian pharaohs, which weren't Egyptian at all. They were frickin' Hyksos, But nevertheless, when it was under a Hyksosian king, it was still a JWO, but he was professing to be Egyptian. And so Egyptian tax dollars were sent up to Jerusalem, and they were collecting some tribute. This is later, And then, of course, under Babylon, the same thing, right? They weaseled their way into the king's court, and now through proxy, they would rule under the Babylonian king and, inflict taxation, and a good deal of it wound up in their pockets. So here it is now. This king, who now has caught on to the little scheme, is laying this whole thing out. Yes, it's come to my attention. You've been pulling this crap all this time, and now you're trying to pull it with me? He's telling them, we're done. Wow. And again, this is all recorded right in the Not So Holy Book. Isn't that a kicker? He went on to say, now issue an order to these men to stop work, stop this decree that he had previously made to rebuild Jerusalem. Now he's withdrawing all of that to stop the work so that this city will not be rebuilt until I so order it under his control without the JWOs, trying to use it to their advantage. Be careful not to neglect this matter, he said. Why let this threat grow to the detriment of the royal interests? Santa Maria. Unbelievable, man. You'd think that you were reading a document recorded in some secular history book, and especially an anti-Semitic one. But no, this is right from their own holy book. Let me cite again where this is so you can look it up for yourself and read it. This is juicy, man. This is juicy. This is where Xerxes woke up and smelled the roses, and now recalled all of his previous, nullified all of his previous orders and recalled uh, the people that he had sent there to rebuild Jerusalem. He halted the whole project. Ezra 4, 17 to 21. That is classic. Print that up on 18 by 24 paper and hang it up on your wall. Anyway, it wasn't long after this that the Jews of the day began creating uprisings within Persia to take it down, just like what happened with Babylon. They loved Babylon, or at least Babylon's king, only in so much as he was doing their bidding, right? When that stopped, bang, they're taking Babylon down. Now here they are doing that with Persia as well. Anyway, you might be interested to know, very interested to know, that earlier on, before the king woke up to what was going on with the JWO pig bastards and, ceased and desisted in assisting them, and before, the JWO started to rise up against him, while this little cozy relationship was still underway, the Persians had established the world's first large-scale coinage system. Oh, such a system had been in place before this under them, too, but not on the scale that it had occurred, under Persian reign. It was a fiat currency. Anyway, isn't it obvious that the JWOs had Persia, at least earlier on, completely under their thumb with loans, which is how they were able to manipulate Persian kings the way that they did, right? It was all a ruse, all a deception, until Xerxes caught on, and now the gig was up. And so what do? The same thing they always have done before. They create uprisings now to take him down. And when that didn't work, they decide to turn on the Greeks and get the Greeks to take him down for them. I've already touched on this before, the Greek and Persian wars, but it was in 449 with the drawing up of the Peace of Calais when Persia finally agreed to stay out of the Aegean. They had to. The Greeks were kicking their butt. But why? Why were the Greeks kicking their butt? Because they were getting more heavily funded by the JWOs to make sure. They were bringing in other mercenaries, too, to join with them. You had the Spartans, right? We already talked about them and the JWO influence there. They apparently were JWOs themselves. But anyway, so, yeah, the Greeks now start emerging as the dominant force because the Persians weren't their buddy anymore. In fact, the Persians were turning against them. Ultimately, they used the Greeks to inflict a heavy punishment on the Persians, right? Just like they used the Persians to inflict a punishment on the Babylonians before that. But the Peace of Calais, how familiar sounding that is. Can you say Peace of Westphalia, for example? Drafted up right after the Jew-rigged 30 Years' War in 1648. Oh, how history keeps repeating itself. Peace. Or how about the Jew-rigged Versailles Treaty right after World War I? Yeah, more peace, right? Peace treaty, when all that did is set up the stage for frickin' World War II by oppressing Germany with reparation payments, right? Which were later magnified through the Dawes and the Young Plan. Oh, you gotta love it. It's true that history repeats itself. And why? Because the Goyim have never caught on to who it is that keeps repeating history. That's why. They keep opening their doors to them and letting them play their same little games. Anyway, the most famous battle of the Greco-Persian wars was the Battle of Thermopylae, which I already mentioned recently, in 480, where the Spartans fought the Persians to the death. Um, Even though they lost, the fact that they stood up to the Persians incited the Greeks, to become more aggressive. And with all the shekels they were getting, yeah, that gave them the impetus to move forward. And they did finally defeat them. The JWOs through history, folks, unfortunately, have always gotten their way. Even when they got kicked in the teeth, right? In the long run, they still managed to turn things around. Like what happened in 70 AD, right? They don't care that a bunch of low-level Jews die. In the long run, they will manipulate things, always have, and always turn things around. It might take them a few centuries to do it, but they're relentless SOBs. They don't quit until they get what they want. Oh, something's got to be done about these people. This is the age-old issue of what was called the Jewish question, right? If you're not familiar with that, look that up. That was a big problem for kings, non-Zio controlled kings. A big problem for them. What do we do about this Jewish question? These people are never happy. You try to be nice to them and they screw you over every single time. It's a problem that's never been resolved, and it never will as long as people still continue to trust them and allow them to hold high positions in government, finance, media, education, you name it. They can't be trusted, ever, with holding any high position. And you got to make sure that they're not trying to manipulate their way through by sending others on their behalf to do their manipulations. They're always, always, always seeking an open door, even a crack in the door to slip their way through. You have to be constantly vigilant with these people. But anyway, I'll stop this video there. Lots more to come. Oh, they rigged so many other wars, so many other conflicts down through the ages. And like I said, we're only just looking at the more major examples of this. All right, guys, thanks for joining me. We'll catch you in the next video. Take care.